Fraser, tell me about your background. Just your experience in delivering applications, because it's been, what, over a 20, 30-year period?
Yeah, this is the 39th year delivering software
39.
solutions only to clients. I haven't worked for anyone in that as an employee. My background is marine biology. Went to school for that, and now I've turned that into a fish biology master's degree at one point, and now I'm using software to build things for environmental applications and business applications, and a varied group of people.
So you've programmed in a number of different languages at this point using different tool sets and IDEs.
Yes, yes. There's been so many that it's sort of blurs. You think about whether or not they're useful anymore, and they'll just get you to understanding not quickly, but I say after 10 years that expertise is fleeting. It's something that it's useful for a time, and it pretty well it'll become passed over for something else. So you need to keep track of that. And then back in the beginning, for the first 25 years minimum, that's all you had to work with. You were working with languages, and you were building applications that way.
So, I mean, in your portfolio of delivered applications, I'm assuming it included everything from native apps running on uh, client computers or servers to web apps.
Yes, everything short of the mobile dedicated native apps.
Hmm.
Writing for standalone devices that ran on their own operating systems, not the level where you do assembly code, but just above that. And most in the beginning, it was desktop. That was the primary focus. Most people were running desktop
Well, yeah,
applications, and
fair enough.
then
Yeah.
eventually in the 90s we had a couple of visual tools come in for the operating system, Windows, and that Apple had their own, and a couple other ones. And then the web hit big time around 95. They were starting to make applications that ran in a central place where you didn't have to send a diskette to your client and have them like pray that they would be able to load that diskette on their whatever operating system they were running, version that was, and get your application up and running, and you talk to them over the phone the whole process. So it became a simplification in many ways, but in other ways it was less contact with the client.
Right. Would you include JavaScript as part of the suite?
Yes, in the beginning, JavaScript was the way to get at the web stuff,
Right.
but it wasn't required at all in the desktop. The desktop things were able to be used in things like Visual Basic, and there was at the time there was a big push on things called fourth generation languages. You may remember DBase
Oh,
at one
right.
point and RBase, and I used one called Advanced Revelation. You know, interesting names. And what they did is they offered a full suite of tools to get data and applications running, and you could deliver those to clients. And since you're after clients, you're following what clients want. You try to have to get your tools generic so that they can cover a broad path to the destination that they're after, so that you wouldn't want to pick too specific a tool. So JavaScript at the time was only used, well, I wouldn't say only, but a lot of time used as an adjunct to making the web applications a little bit faster, a little bit of animation, a little bit of tweaking of how the interface responded. Well, of course, that got blown away fairly quickly when people saw they could use it there to do more things, and the JavaScript itself started to blossom. And back in the middle of the teens, 2010s, we got JavaScript that ran on the server as well as on the client. So you could do everything you wanted in JavaScript. It became a major tool. Not the best tool, and of course there's very different ways of assessing what best is. But from a client perspective, it was a good investment to know JavaScript.
Well, I know in our times together, trying to solve some of the things I was trying to do, you would point out periodically, oh, yeah, that's the old way they used to do it with CSS. And yeah, they don't do it like that anymore in JavaScript. It's done like this. And
Yeah.
so,
And,
It's
and
like,
it's
okay.
it's very depressing sometimes to think about that there's an old way and a young way to do things, because most people you talk to would not even think about that.
Yeah.
But you know, you get a perspective that way. So the latest programming environment is JavaScript for me, but there's lots of other ones out there. You
Right.
can work on the web, but the primary client side, a browser-based environment to interact with your web page and with the user, is JavaScript. So almost everyone knows it now.
So why did you decide to begin using, given all your experience in all, a visual development environment? And it's just really a two-part question. In this case, it would be maybe largely like Builder. You may be using other tools. But the other question, as a part of that, is are you still offering clients traditional solutions from a software point of view? So, what made you want to switch over, and are you continuing to use traditional solutions?
Well, the big thing, and yes, I am. I'm using traditional. I use a programming environment called Meteor, which is one of these JavaScript on the server, JavaScript on the client, that maintains state between the two, which is different than traditional JavaScript environments, which are stateless. But yes, the JavaScript programming paradigm is very useful, and for big projects, it sometimes is the only way to go. You have to build app with complete and utter control
Mm-hmm.
over every aspect, because you don't really know how to produce some things at the beginning, and you have to be able to make sure you can do that.
Right.
Now, the problem with that is that you have to do a lot of work before anything can be visualized by the client.
Right.
You're you're working, and you know, I'm working on it. It'll be there soon, but it's not coming soon. Most of the visual aspects come in the last 20% of the project. So you can imagine that makes for a less than stellar experience from the expectations that the customer has, and they need some feedback. So a lot of the mock-ups tools that came out earlier, before visual coding tools came out, were aimed at giving them some comfort about what it should look like, what it could look like, how it might look and interact in a rather different way, but very close. Now comes visual coding tools, which are what you see is what you get, and they're becoming better and better at doing things, and they're abstracting away some of the things that you have to learn as a coder into some generally acceptable client language.
Mm.
Wow, we're now in business, so now I can put something together for a client, which isn't by any means done, that has a lot of the functionality built in, and I can just add to it behind the scenes. So instead of building the pyramid from the base, I get to scaffold the pyramid up and make the facades and to make it hollow, and I can work on later filling the stuff that they don't see. So that has it's a as a tool for client relations, big advantage. So the no-code tools weren't there for a while. I looked at them briefly maybe 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They were things like Wix and Weebly and the different website builders that
Yeah,
were
they
out
were pretty
there,
limited.
and
Mm-hmm.
then there were the plug-in based systems like WordPress that allowed people to create with no experience in coding, very much an experience that they would like without having to get into coding. So the pieces were there, but the JavaScript side wasn't. So when I found Builder, which is one of the coding tools that's out there, and there's many of them now, it's hard to any, but you know, you just can't keep track of how many there might be.
Right.
But there are some bigger players, and Builder is a newer player, but it's been around for a long time. So when I started looking at them, I looked at the bigger players, some of the promising ones, and someone told me about Builder, and I thought, well, there's one I hadn't heard, and well, it wasn't surprising, but I did go take a look at it, and I was really impressed with the fact that it didn't tell me how I would want my interface to look. It said, well, you can do anything you want with us. We'll give you all the different customizations you need, including be able to get to a server. So my primary concern working for clients was making sure I wasn't painted into a corner, that I'm a far way down in the progress, thinking I'm already near the finish line, and then I hit that brick wall where I can't do a thing. That's what I didn't want to happen. And you know, it's a bit of a crystal ball thing. You really can't tell if it's going to be that way or not, but you get a feeling from indicators of some of the things you're looking at. And what I saw was the ability to generically produce my own inputs, my own actions, and contact a server, contact databases, contact things. I didn't see a payment gateway. I was thinking, how am I going to, clients are going to want to
Right.
get paid
Right.
for whatever app you build for them if they're doing SaaS. And within a day, someone told me that they were working on Stripe integration, and I think a week later it was ready. And I was thinking, whoa, this is
Boom.
good. I'm happy to see this. And then so I started digging a little more deeper, and I had a client at the time who was a big project in mind, and I said, one of the problems I have is being able to show you what I've got done
Hmm.
from my perspective that you can understand from yours. And to do that, I had to show them code, and it'd be, here, look at, I've done this, reams and reams of code, and I've got the, so what does it look like? Oh, it looks like that.
Right.
Well, it's not ready yet because then, I was always saying it's not ready yet from that perspective. Let's move to this new environment and let's see if we can both work on it. If at least, the design parts you can get involved with. And this caught his attention, and we took a leap of faith and started building it out. So it's a bigger project. So it's not anywhere near being done, but it's on its way.
So in your case, it sounds like what you're saying is Builder made it possible to show uh, immediate ongoing progress to the client with regards to what it's going to look like, what they're telling you, because it seems it's an ever-changing process anyway with a client. Um,
Yeah.
but you also provide as an independent, um, uh, you know, person, developer, that if you need to deliver something in a traditional coding environment, you'll do that too. It's whatever the customer wants.
Yes. And sometimes, and most of the time, the customer doesn't know what vehicle you wish to use
Right.
or they wish to use. They've heard something, those sorts of things are the kind of questions that happen near the beginning. And so you have to be able to not choose, not think of everything as a nail just because you only own a hammer.
Yeah. Right.
So it becomes difficult to become generalist that way. So you're looking for tools that are generalist if you can.
Right.
And when I settled on Meteor, which was the coding environment, JavaScript on the front end and the back end, it was because it was a multi-tool. It was not a unit tasker. But I had that problem of, I'd like to try this now, and this new opportunity came up, and I think we'd like to move this way. And I'm saying, yeah, I agree with you. What would it look like? And I'm thinking, oh, here we go. I've got to go create this
There we
final
are.
part of the design before
Right.
the initial part is ready. And then that's just the way I choose to program because I always think that the options have to be left open for the future.
Yeah.
If you go ahead and build these fine-tuned parts of the pyramid at the beginning, from a coding point of view, you have to make these assumptions in between. And once they become entrenched, it's very difficult to unwrite them and redo it without a lot of work. And so the builder tool kit appealed to me because it meant that they were building blocks. The blocks could be put together in a sort of Lego fashion, but the blocks always had a built-in way of connecting, and they were expected to be there. So I could either write that way myself, which I do in many cases, or I could uh, take a chance on another tool that was doing it. So I did. It took me a good week to really understand how you approach life as a no coder as opposed to
Hmm.
a coder, because you keep interpreting what they're doing in their code tool. Oh, they must be doing this, they must be doing that. And in many respects, that's the wrong way to look at it. Yet it does help in some respects. Okay, it must be that they're waiting for this to happen, or this particular block will expect a future block and have an escape mechanism if it doesn't work out. And yes, that's the kind of way it worked. And so once you start thinking how they approach that paradigm,
Oh, interesting.
that way of thinking with their coding tools, then I could start to adapt that to how I thought about my paradigm that I was trying to work with. And you get to a point where you've got 80% of it. It's 80-20 Pareto rule all the time, that you can do 80% of what you want right away or pretty close. But then you hit that area where you just don't agree with how they went about things. And this is where being a coder is a poor, poor poor citizen to be sitting at the same table as a no-code tool, because why don't they just do it this way? And it's not the way to approach that. So you need ways to customize, and the customizations available in Bildr in this case, and others as well, involve writing JavaScript, hooking it in the right place,
Right.
and
So
moving on.
let's sort of push into a finer aspect of that, and that's a is a term that comes up pretty often when you start talking about tools like this, especially the no-code tools, of opinionated versus unopinionated.
Right.
And I think for some people, probably for any of the new no-code or people who haven't coded before, it's sort of like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I think as a developer, you do. And in Bildr, they've decidedly and for good reasons gone with the it's a sort of non-opinionated, or they tried not to tell you exactly how things are going to work. Maybe you can explain this further. But my understanding is on a lot of tools, I mean, a simple example would be Wix, where it's like, here's these 12 different websites, and there's like a half a dozen little things that you can change, but if there's anything else you want to do on it, you just can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, the design of the user interface for the person doing the web project is opinionated to the point of you quickly run into walls.
I think that is a design decision that the tool has to make, and they trade off this power versus quick learning, because
Right.
their job is
That's
to get users and adopters, and if you know what you're doing, you can use both approach, an opinionated and a non-opinionated approach with a tool. But once you've got an application to write, you are thinking about it from the point of view of the outcome, what's coming at the end. And when you look at the tool, an opinionated tool, you'll say, well, it only puts in things on the screen that fill the whole width, and then you put them down the page. So there's a width here, and there's another component here and there. They go up and down the page, but they always full width. What if you wanted them side by side? Or a form, the form is always one underneath the other. Well, if they're
right.
all a bunch of check boxes, it looks kind of lopsided. You want to put a few over there. Well, that's where opinionated and non-opinionated really show up. You want in things like Builder and others, they allow you to move them where you want. And others say, well, I'm going to trade off all that flexibility
For some
for
simplicity.
simplicity and quick to design, and a nice combination of styles that look good right off the bat. In Builder and other tools, they're trying to let you decide on. So if you want your own style, and it's a style based on blue and purple and a touch of orange, you can do that in any environment. Those things work. But if your spacing requirements are such, or
Right.
your animation is in a certain way, or that you want to
Typography.
dynamically change things,
Right.
well, you're now getting into things where the opinionated framework is going to fall short. So since I'm a client guy, I don't know what the client wants. And often, and I allow them to change their mind as they go. There's no way they have to stick to any kind of decision they make at the beginning. The projects are too big for that. They're too long. No one's idea at the beginning is their idea at the end of such kind of projects. They want to take advantage of things that happen and all that. So I'm happy with all that. So as a result, I need to keep my options open until someone has to make the decision on those things. And that only happens when you have the flexibility. So I like the unopinionated tool, especially for CSS. Uh, I'm okay with my bungling of designs because I'm not a designer.
Yeah.
But if someone is a designer and they've got a very eclectic way of doing things, I want to be able to implement that. And that requires me to have full control. So even obscure CSS functions, if they're available, I want to be able to put them in. And some of them you just can't. They're just not there. They decide you don't ever going to need that. Another area where that shows up is in the language itself. The HTML and CSS, they've been around for a while, and they've had parameters that have been adopted and made less favorable and then fallen out of favor, but they're still in there for supporting older sites. So what these tools say, well, you don't need to know all the history of what this thing used to be able to do. You should just be doing it this way, and this is the way we think you should be doing it. And you can make it look sort of like you want, but what if you have to do it that way? And
Right.
you're just out of luck in some cases. So that took away quite a few of the players for me. And then JavaScript, of course, being able to write my own JavaScript in places. I mean, it's not willy-nilly JavaScript. You can't put it everywhere. In some tools, they allow you to do that, they're quite remarkable. And the balance of that, the rest of the things that other tools do really well, this tool doesn't do it all now. So you've got this neat new feature paired with these missing needed features, and you're just dealing with that all the time. It's like buying a car. You can't construct your car from the models that they sell from the lots
Right.
in the current year. You have to take what's there, and the combinations are always a balance.
It's nice that Bildr has a great deal of flexibility like that. Speaking from sort of when newer to actually understanding how to build web apps and deliver those, I know during our sessions together, the thing that was of greatest joy, and then I noticed was not there in some of the other tools I played around with later, was just trying to understand CSS
Mm.
initially 2 or 3 months ago and getting things to work and whatnot. And you would say, just go over here to this panel on the right and click on inline styles and go and just look at what the CSS is directly. Oh yeah, right. So in Builder I could go down and I can go up. I can copy that stuff out and put it over in another element. And it was just so nice, even though have not worked with a lot of CSS myself. The more I've used it, the more I can see exactly how it works, and it's very easy to change right there in the user interface. But yeah, I can keep working at the graphic level if I want to. So for me, it's been quite a joy.
As you progress from novice to intermediate to expert, different tools have offered that path differently. Some tools are optimized for quick to intermediate
Right.
so that you have this confidence to keep going, but it might be quite a journey to go to expert because of some of the roadblocks you might hit or some of the things that aren't built for you anymore that you have to do yourself. And now you don't have the tools to build something yourself. You've got to come up with them some other way.
Hmm.
Builder isn't set up that way. It's kind of a slow to intermediate.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if I get to expert ever for me because I'm not an expert at it. But I think I'm enough to get my way to intermediate and be able to build something which is close to what I want and from the point of view of visual. And I will then take a direction gladly from those who have a design balance that I lack. The other part of it is someone in a coding environment thinks about APIs, these application programmer interfaces, connecting to the outside world from your app to send an email or to ask a database or in something in your case, getting information
Remote
from
radios. Yeah.
the radio, yes, or the weather from the local town.
Right.
Those are all nice to haves in
Yeah.
some people's mind, but they're critical in others. And you make an adoption. The one thing I actually don't realize when you're doing no code tools, it's one no code tool or no code tools. You can't use two. Like
That's
it would be
true.
nice. I want to have this one and this one. Can I use them both?
No.
Well, maybe you could use parts of them for parts of your application, and that's typically in some of them that don't support native mobile apps.
Right. Yeah.
You can do the desktop in one, you do the mobile in another one, but that's double the work, generally speaking. Some tools do allow for both. They have compromises that, like everything else, how they deal with that. So you really have to think about your effort as a person who's a freelancer. You work on your own. If you had someone to delegate to, as in most things in life, if you had someone to delegate to, it's so easy. Your choices are, I don't want to do it, let someone else do it. But if that's not the case, then and the fun is in actually for me, working with a client and dealing with these problems, dealing
Right.
with the constraints, dealing with the opportunities that come up, then you'll need to learn one tool and learn it well enough to get through the possible things and hope you can get past the things you don't know about yet.
So, Fraser, I think that brings us to the end. What did I leave out? What else would you like for me to ask?
Let's see. No code tools are here to stay.
Yeah.
They've come such a long way. You can tell when a application space gets filled up with different vendors, and they're all small, and then a few big ones come up. You'll see that in over the years with things like spreadsheets in the 90s. There was all sorts of spreadsheets came out, and then we ended up. I mean, there was IBM had one,
Mhm.
and Lotus one two
That's right.
three, if you remember back
Oh,
then,
yes.
was
Oh,
the
yes, very well.
king.
Hmm.
It was in
And
Symphony, and
notes.
there was all sorts of. But then eventually things shake out. So when you're at that sort of part of the market of a new type of technology, and it's not really new, but it's seeming new to people.
Hmm.
You're going to find lots of choice, and you determine whether you're an early adopter type of person or you're a person who's trying to play the long game.
That's a good point.
I'm an early adopter type of guy. I
You're willing to
do
put up
like
with
the early adopters. I like working with new products, but I have a nice advantage that I can always ditch all of them and go back to code for client work. But if that's not the case for you and you're thinking about getting to no code, then I would take a good look at least two. One that's fairly prevalent, got a lot of money behind it, and then pick one, other one, and learn them both. Maybe not right at the same time, but enough to you can, because each one will offset the other and give you a perspective that the other
trade-offs.
one is
Hmm.
it doesn't have, and it'll deepen, and both of them will deepen each other because of what you understand. You'll see, oh, the commonality, there's an overlap here, and in that overlap area between the two tools, you will get depth of understanding. And the other ones you'll get an inference. You'll see what they can do. So since they're here to stay, and since they're such useful tools, especially for prototypes,
Yeah.
really good idea for MVPs. You can always go coded route and pay for someone if you're not doing it yourself. But if you want something that you can do yourself, then find one that can do code as well. They're called low code sometimes. They have a JavaScript portion, or they can connect to a API, which
Right.
is called a REST API. It's a type of API which allows for reading, writing to data records, as well as other things, so that you can pass control from your app to something else, and there do the things you can't do in the one you're in now.
Right.
So I mean, it's young, it's a young place. If you're a designer, for example, I really recommend you dip your toes into the no-code water, because you will strengthen your relationships with the coders who are doing your designs, because you'll understand what's a little bit they're going through, and vice versa, because you can now explain things to
And
them.
would you say Builder's a good place to make that first introduction to that from a coder's?
It's a good one. It is a good one. It's a deep tool. It's a deep, unopinionated tool. So you need a little staying power to, but actually, as of today, I'll take that back, because as of today, they've put together a release with a couple of starter apps, which are phenomenal.
Amazing SaaS apps.
And
Yeah.
they will get you past some of the things that I didn't have when I was, and Tom didn't have when we were starting at it.
Right.
A completely filled out app meant for a client
Right.
type business even.
Yeah, I'm starting over on one of mine, I think. We'll talk about that
You might
later.
want to look at that.
Well, all right. Fraser, thank you so much for some time. I hope this is helpful to others. I'm sure you and I will be talking more about some other ideas. And take care.
Thank you, Tom. It's been fun.